Welcome everybody to our inaugural recorded Dev Roundtable. Long time roundtabling, first time recording, etc. And I have a little bit of something to talk about constraints. I think let me see what I actually said as the topic is constraints being helpful. We're going to talk about database schemas, data types, and adding types to your dynamic languages. So before I start with like sharing my screen and all that, I just want a quick sort of show of hands. I think most people here are primarily, at least now, like Ruby and Rails developers or something. Let me look. Is Marcella is largely Clojure? Is that true?
Yes.
I mean, I know a little bit about that, and some of this may not really apply to your experience at all, but a large part of what I like to do is get discussion and hear from everybody, hence the roundtable. And so you might have some really interesting perspectives. So with that said, I'm going to share my screen. I think I got this all ready for a good portion of the screen. Here we go. Can everybody see that well? A blank browser screen?
Yep.
So the first thing I want to talk about is databases, right? And so a lot of us, I think, are very familiar with, seeing part of my chat, are very familiar with especially relational databases, things that have specific structures and schemas. I'm pretty sure we've all heard about like NoSQL or document databases where it's a lot more free for all for what you put in. Like in a sense, it's more of a key value store, and you can just sort of specify keys and values how you like. And that seems really nice, right? It's very flexible, but you kind of don't know what's going on and what's going to come back. And you either have to do a lot of stuff in your code to sort of check, does this thing that I come back have this value, have this field? Or you find out, like, this is what I've seen basically everywhere, is you're basically saying, like, okay, this thing that's a person has these fields, right? Like we can expect these every time. So that's sort of a really quick, like, this is all amorphous, but we need a schema. We need to know what fields are there so we can make sense of this, right? We don't want just like a open struct or a hash to come back. We want, a person with these attributes. That's a quick thing with that. The thing that I like to talk about more with databases is sort of how you do relationships. And, because I work with relational databases all the time, and, relationships between entities. And so I have, some diagrams here because I love diagrams. I'll go over these quickly. I also have some code to talk about this, but here's the situation, right? You have some sort of like blog software, right? You have posts, you have comments, and you want to add likes in, the ability for users to like something, right? And here's one way to do it, right? You already have the post and the comment, and then you put in this like here, and it's attached to both. And then you have to do something like, you have to ensure only one is set, because you don't want to like a single like to be about two different things. This is a simple, straightforward way of doing it. It has its own issues. Then there's this way of doing it. And like I said, I like diagrams, but I also have code to go over this. This is, if you're familiar with STI, single table inheritance. So then you have this idea of content. And it's all in this content or contents table. And in there you have a type. And so the type says whether something is a post or a comment. And then you have like is attached directly to content, and that's easy, right? So it's just attached to one content row, one content ID. And so you're just saying, I like this content, and the content happens to be a post or a comment. This also has its pros and cons. And then here is like a very flexible thing with Rails, as far as I know, has introduced, a while ago, not recently, the idea of like a polymorphic join, is where you have not just one thing that's like, this is the post ID or whatever, is you have by convention, you do, what is this, an adjective, like a somethingable, likable deal. And so you do a likable type and a likable ID. So these will be set to, if it's a post, it'll be likable type is post and likable ID is the post ID. If it's a comment, it'll be likable type is comment, likable ID is the comment ID. And this is really nice, but this is where things get a little funky, because technically you could put anything in here. And my favorite thing to think about is like, liking all the way down. You can just like another like. You can like anything in your database. You can like a user. And I mean, we all like some users, right? You can like the liking of a comment. You can do whatever, and it's ridiculous. So, but again, pros and cons, and a lot of it doesn't really show up with just this post and comment deal, but with even more stuff going on. So let me bring in the code that might explain this a little better. And maybe you can't see this. Maybe this is better. Maybe it's too much. You all can tell me. So this is what I call the direct, right? So you have, this post, which has many comments and likes. A comment belongs to a post. It has many likes. And then you have to do this sort of thing with like, okay, a like belongs to a post, belongs to a comment. They're both optional. And then you want to make sure there's exactly one association, right? Like only, and this is one way to do it. But so like, you check the IDs. If they're all blank, you say, hey, no association has been set. What kind of like is this? Doesn't make sense. If multiple are set, then it's like, wait a minute, that's not good either. And then that works. And here's, a little schema, right? And this is nice. It's direct. Everything has what they need, and you have foreign keys. This is really nice because you can ensure that every post ID in the likes table corresponds to an actual existing post. Every comment ID is an actual existing comment. For the STI example, it's a little different. We have like content, validates type, want to make sure that it's an actual content thing and not just typeless, whatever content. And then you see this post is a subclass of content, comment is a subclass of content, and then like just like belongs to content, easy. And then you have this, let's just go down to the likes table. You have the content ID, you add a foreign key, again, you make sure the content exists. But now you have this table contents, and it's a little weird because like, okay, type is fine. And both things have body. If you remember, I didn't really talk about this much, but like both posts and comments have body. But now here you have like, okay, post ID, that only really makes sense for a comment. And title only really makes sense for a post. So now you have these columns that are going to be, blank half the time, or, some of the time, depending on what kind of content this is. But there's still pros and cons here. And then we have the polymorphic, and you don't actually have to do this concern, but it's just kind of a nice pattern to do. So you have this likable deal, and then like post includes likable. So it has many likes as likable, and it has many comments. Comment, same thing, belongs to post. And here's a difference. It belongs to likable, polymorphic, true. And then you have these deals. And again, you have post, title, and body, comment, post ID and body, totally cool. And then likes, you have the type and the ID. But as you notice, how do you do a foreign key? You can't. I mean, you can do interesting things with some databases, and you can do interesting things with some validations, but everything gets a little more difficult because you can't say, like, this ID has to exist in the posts table because maybe it's a comment, right? Or it has to exist in the comments table because maybe it's a post. And like I said, you can do some constraints, you can do things, but it's a little difficult, and it's also harder to write a join on this if you're trying to get like a comment with all its likes, or I guess the other way, you're trying to get all the comments with the content that they're attached to. But like I said, it's not so bad if you're just doing like this, post and comment. But now let's imagine, you're adding a new type of thing. Like you're not just doing a blog, you're doing like a CMS. So you also have pages, right? So let's just start here because we are. And so it's pretty easy. I'll just like take these things and I'll put it down here and I'll get rid of that. It'll go in page, obviously. It'll go here. And it's probably just that. No comments on a page. Let's not be ridiculous. But that's it. Just page, includes likable. We're done. We probably want to do something here. So we'll create another table. Right? Put it here. And probably a page is the same thing. It has a title and a body. It's like a post, but different. And then that's it. That's like all the changes you have to do. So makes the polymorphic thing pretty easy. But again, so like I said, you make no other changes. You like the likable type, likable ID will handle this just fine. Pretty good. Let's go back to the STI version. This again will be pretty easy. We'll just basically do this page, class page less than content. I think that's it, right? Like I said, there's no comments. So we're due. Oh, wait, it's not it because we have to say this. And then it could also be something, we could push the has many likes up to content so that it happens automatically. So this would really be empty. And then again, that's all we have to do here. Contents, and page has title and body. So that's nice. We're not adding any more things to this table. And I guess we're making title more of a real thing, but post ID now becomes even less important because only 1/3 of the types of things that can appear here actually use post ID. But still got the foreign key and everything. And then the direct, what do we do here? We do, again, probably something like this. We'll just take these and move them over here. Right? And then this is, oh no, this is annoying. Do that. No. Let's do that. And then, okay, if they're all blank, yeah, I have to do this a little different because 2 and 3 are just different things, I guess. And if this length is greater than 1, no good. And then here, of course, we have to do we have to completely screw this up. Sorry about that. Just doing it live. I didn't have all this set up. And then of course, another one of, I just closed my editor. Let me get that back. How embarrassing. It's back.
It's not a live demo unless something goes wrong. So
You
bam,
didn't
it's officially a
you
live
didn't
demo.
you didn't see a thing. It's like it never happened. Right. Little one of these. Right. And I have to do this again. Yeah, something like that. And let me save it so that, if it closes again. And so I think, as you can see, just from everything I did, like there was like more typing going on and more work the further like I went from flexibility to entirely full of constraints, entirely direct. But there's also like you have the most control over this and the most separation. And it's the easiest thing to do is if you want to do something like, I just want all the likes that are on posts, right? Pretty simple to do here. It's a little harder to do with the STI because you have to look at the content and the type. And it's also harder on the polymorphic side because you have to look at the ID and the type, at least in the same table, but you still have to look at multiple things. But if you start thinking of more and more types of content or more and more types of different things, like the STI example was nice because I thought of a different type of content. But if I just a whole different thing where like I decided I also want to like, users or something, then it gets back to, okay, I have to choose a direct or a polymorphic something. I'm going to pause there because I've been talking and showing a lot, and just see if anybody has any questions or has anything they'd like to respond to or bring up about that.
I'm curious, Yossef, if you considered going like one tab further to the left on the table structure and having separate likes tables for each likable thing, like posts likes, comments likes, and if you did consider that, what sort of trade-offs are involved in that, in your opinion?
Yeah, like that's definitely doable. I think that is a little, personally, I think that's a little like over the top with the direct approach. Like I think the direct and putting all the likes in one table, I guess it does have some of the same issues as the STI example, but in a different table because you have these 3 indexes, and for every row, only one of them will exist. So if you do care about, database normalization or, row size or things, then yeah, that makes sense, is like a posts likes, and it's just, the ID, that's it. A comment likes, pages likes. And I will also head off if anyone's wondering about this. You could, this doesn't have the further thing of like, if you're just saying whether this comment has been liked or not, you can put a flag in there, right? Like a Boolean. These, I was thinking like it goes without saying, but I should have put there like these are an instance of a user liking a page or a post or a comment. So that's why it's a separate table. And so I feel like if you do the separate tables, then you also kind of have to have like the separate models. Like that to me is a little too much repetition, but it could be that I don't have a really good argument for that. It's more of a fuzzy area that I don't have good language for right now.
Cool.
Yeah. Thanks. Anybody else? I'm also stopping here because this kind of wraps up the database part, the data part, and now I'm going to move to the code part, which is some fun times. But anybody going once? All right, we're good. So now I'm going to get rid of this guy. I don't need an editor anymore, even though I'm doing code, because I have the magic of online REPLs. So
Jadoodle.
Yeah, Jadoodle. I'm sure that's how it's pronounced. Who here is familiar with Perl? Perl is how I started my like actual, programming for myself fun times, and actually got some work out of it before I moved on to Ruby. I see one hand. I see two hands. All right. You know what? It's fine. It's fine to not know about Perl. I mean, I haven't thought about it that much in a long time, but there are lots of things about it that are very easy. Let's just talk about what's going on right here, and then we'll move on from Perl soon, but you have to see some weird stuff here. Let's execute. Also, if you can't see this very well, please let me know. I'll adjust size. So this makes sense. Sum of 10 and 25 is 35. I mean, it's pretty simple math. But what if we put 10 in quotes so it's a string? Oh, that still works. That's good. What if we put 25 in quotes like it's a string? Oh, you didn't expect that, did you? Or maybe you did. I don't know. What if we use a different little operator? It's a dot instead of a plus. Dot means concatenate two strings. I will point out that Perl, when you asked for the year about a date, returned two-digit number since 1900. And a lot of people just mindlessly put it after 19. So Perl did not have a year 2000 bug. Perl had a year 19,100 bug. And it was a fun time for everybody. They were looking ahead. But why am I talking about some of this stuff? Let's go back to pluses, right? This is fine. What if we do 10A? It's still good. That's a 10. What if we do A25? Right? A25 is 0 because it's just trying to turn it into an integer, and it sees the first thing that's not a digit, and it's like, we're done. We can also do something like this. What about 10A plus 2A5? 2A5 is 2. And Perl is really nice, but it's just like, it's as dynamic as they come. It's just, you give me some values, I'm going to use it the way I think. And yeah, Casey, you enjoy that. And if you want some more stuff like this in other languages, here's a really fun talk that you should all see. And if you can't find this easily, I will share. I will share the link in the channel. I'll probably put it in the show notes or whatever. Yeah, it's by, I can't remember his name right now. Gary Bernhardt. Gary Bernhardt. Destroyallsoftware.com, and look for the talk WAT, and it's a good one. But let's move on to Ruby. Ruby's good. We like Ruby. Let's execute this thing. Sum of X and Y is 25. It's 35 because it's 10 and 25. What happens if we try to do this? Ooh, Ruby doesn't like that because it knows it's dynamic, but there's still like objects under the hood. And it's like, we're not going to add a string to an integer. That doesn't even make sense. But then you can do some things like this. You know, this is kind of what Ruby or Perl would do under the hood. It's just like, let me just try to coerce it, right? The main thing here is, I think what it said was no implicit coercion. It can be coerced. Sometimes it says things like no implicit coercion. So it's just like Ruby is trying. And then it says, no, I'm good. I think you can make it work more like Perl by opening up the string class and putting a coerce method in there, but let's not make this worse. In fact, I'm going to go on a limb here and probably, even though I've done this many times in the past, I like to think I've grown. Don't like add methods to core objects. For the most part, don't do it. I give Rails or active support a pass with blank and present, but for the most part, let's just not. Let's all be nicer to each other than that. So let's move on to some other Ruby things that make a little more. And this is where Ruby has a large history of so-called duck typing. You know, just if it quacks like a duck kind of deal. And so rather than saying, hey, I want to make sure there's a string in here, or I want to make sure there's an array or whatever, it's like, Casey, you're just making a fun joke, or do you actually have to leave?
No, just jokes.
Okay, just checking. I wanted to say a fond farewell if you had to go. So yeah, there's a lot of, you know, just sort of checking, does this have this method, or does this object respond to, like, does it do each, right? Does it do open? Does it do whatever? And so here's an example, right? These are both enumerables, arrays and hashes. They both get their each from the same module, enumerable, sort of like I made a module likable before, but they each works a little differently, right? Here, you get each element of the array, right? And you get each element of the hash in the sense of like a key value pair. But you have to think about a little more of just like, you know, does this respond to each? Is what is this thing and what will I get back from each? Another thing that I've run into, right? We'll get out of this, is some people do, I don't know who, oh, Joyce, sorry. If you have, you know, an array, you can use the method find, right? And it just finds the first thing that supports this block, right? So the first thing that's greater than 4 or greater than 3. And of course it works, like no matter what order it's in, it'll still be 4 because it's testing everything, right? But let's go back to Rails, right? And what if you have something like this? You know what'll happen if you have the scope. I can't like bring Rails into this Jadoodle very easily, but do you know what'll happen if you don't realize that your array, that your collection is a scope, like an active record relation instead of an array? No takers? This is a completely different find. This is the class level, like model find, and it goes to the database to try to find a specific thing. Scope to whatever where clause you have there, but it's the equivalent of like whatever, let's say post find 3, like let me find the post with ID 3. And you're not passing anything in, you're just giving it a block, and it's not going to enjoy that. It's not good. And so here's another thing you can do. let's bring this in. Do you know what this will do? Like, let's say you want to do something that works the same way. I didn't even know what this would do until I was preparing for this discussion. Let's execute it. It's just an enumerator. It's like, I don't have a block. I don't know what to do. And so let's do something like this. Let's just bring this down, right? Let's put this block in. Okay, that's fine. It finds it. Let's say we do this up here, right? What happens? There's nothing that's greater than 10. It returns nil. Cool. What about this? Undefined call for 3 integer. This is how I found out what this does. The argument for array find or a numeral find is a something to call if it can't find it. And it has to be something to call. So you can do this little guy, and it returns the result of that proc. And so this is like, it's not enough. It's not enough to check what it responds to. You know, you want to know like what that method does, right? And here's another example. I'm not sure if you're, oh yeah, find. This is really bad. This is horrible documentation. I found better one before, but like it returns the if no object matches, calls if none, which is what this should be instead of P1. But yeah, no good. Who here is familiar with OpenURI, the Ruby module, standard lib, I think. Yeah, it's a fun one because you can just like, you include or require OpenURI, and then when you try to open something, it doesn't have to be a file. It could just be a URL, right? That's pretty great. But now you're doing this open, and depending if you don't know what you're passing to open, like if it's a variable instead of a string, then maybe you're going to go out to the internet. Maybe you're going to stay on your system. What if you're not connected? You know, it's no good. So it's like, if you have this method, it's not enough to know the name. You kind of want to know what it does. And you can do more things than just respond to. You can say like, hey, give me the actual method. Give me, and from that object, you're like, what's your arity? Like, how many arguments do you take? Where you defined all this. But I mean, that's not the sort of thing that you need to do in a dynamic language. And it's ugly as hell. So who here is familiar with typed languages? Probably everybody. Did anybody enjoy them?
Me.
I'm sure you do, Max. I didn't mean that to sound as dismissive as
No, it's totally fine. I knew what you meant.
Casey, I don't know if the chat shows up in recording, but just so everybody can see, including whoever watches this later, Casey says, I'm typing most of the time I'm programming. And now I'm wondering if there's a way to silence Casey's chat abilities. But I'm moving on from that. Okay. This sort of thing exists in other places. I don't want to do too many examples, so I'm just using sorbet, which is a external community-based or community-driven type checker for adding types optionally to Ruby. I think Python has this built in since like version 3.5. If you're into JavaScript, you can use TypeScript, things like that, but we're going to focus on sorbet. And here's just an example. This is just like what shows up if you just go to sorbet.run. And so basically what you do, you have to put this little thing in here, typed true. And it is sorbet's like an external something that looks through all your code, and it's a static analysis tool. And then your editor can give you built-in things. It's sort of like a linting tool or something. You can see it you can run it through this before you try to push up to version control. You can make it a requirement. You can run it like built into your editor if it has the tools for it. And so let's not worry about the sig too much, but you see we've defined foo, but we've called foo. And right here, it's like, it doesn't exist. We don't have a foo, right? So instead of getting a runtime error later, you're getting this immediately, right? So let's fix this. Nice. Now let's go back to the typing thing. Give this a sig, right? A signature. Foo takes X. X is an integer, and it returns void. When you do the params, you can optionally give params because not all methods take parameters, but you have to say what it returns. So either void or return something. So now you get like, okay, foo, not an int. That's not good. We expect an integer, but found a string. Don't like it. So of course we can do this. We can type correctly, and it's like, oh, it's fine. And then it gives you, no errors. Great job. But you can also, just talking about the void deal, let's say we do X is this. Let's just get rid of that. And then we do like X to I. Cannot call method 2i on a void type. We're saying we're calling this thing. We are not expecting something back from it. So you can't use it as something. Like you're kind of, you can do basically things like this. This is fine. You can like look at it, but you can't like use it as an object. You see I have a bunch of tabs. Let's look at some more. This is just like, base, I think they call this standard library. Nope, that's that. String plus symbol. It's like, we don't like it because you can't add that. That doesn't even make sense. What about this? Also fine, right? These are all things that are built in. Oh yeah, let me just talk about what we have here. Okay, Cody.
Yeah, Cody.
You had a hand raised, and how long have I not noticed?
Not that long.
Okay.
So Sorbet didn't have a problem with you passing a string to a thing that said int, as long as you had said, convert this. There was no implicit conversion for that string, and you were going to add to it. The foo, foo not a string to I. Sorbet doesn't balk at, but that's still going to fail.
Well, sorry, no, because I did. It was not a string, right?
Yeah.
And then I put a 2i. The 2i is just like takes that string and converts it to an integer, like I was showing before. So it'll convert it to the integer 0 because it doesn't start with it.
So I missed the string to I is 0.
Yeah. Back to this. So like not a string. There, it's like not a string. Cool. And then you do 2i, and it's like that's 0. But if you do 5 not a string, it'll be 5. It's trying to be helpful, but it's not really that helpful. Like if you really care, there is the what is it? Integer method, I think. So you can do like integer 5. Right, is cool. Integer 5 not is like, hey, no. So that even in standard stuff, you can be a little more strict with Ruby. It just depends on what you're using and how you feel about these conversions.
Yeah, well, that's a wild, echoing Casey's. That's a wild fallback. I don't even know that I'd never. Well, you don't fall back into a 0 from a string too often.
Yeah. It's a wild fallback. I don't disagree, but if I went further into the Perl examples, you'd be surprised at what is considered true and false.
Yeah.
You can like if you really want to have some fun, try to see about like what are all the false values in Perl. Think about things like, is 0 false? Is a string containing the character 0 false? Is 0.0 false? I'll leave that all up to you to either play with or forget about as soon as possible. All right, so here's some more. What's this example? Oh, there also there's the idea of things that are nillable, right? So you have something, you can declare methods or declare variables to be something. So it's an array of string, right? A new array of string, and you're getting the zeroth, the first element, right? So foo empty, we don't know because that's nillable, right? We can also do this, like foo equals, let's say 1, 2, 3, right? That's nothing. That's fine. We don't know, but or it can statically check, right? Or actually, there. All right. Foo positive. That's fine. And then this it can positively check because it has it right there. But this is an example of like this array of string comes from outside. We don't know what it is. So it's like what you get is this idea of it's a nillable string. Maybe it's a string, maybe it's nil. And one thing you can do, this is like not the best example of how to really do typing nicely, but like you can say, okay, I know that this array is at least one element long. So that's, you have T must, right? This is all part of like gradual checking, I would say. And there's some talk about this in the chat, and I will get to that because I'm very interested in what people have to say. Just have a couple more examples. Back to the nillable stuff. Here's something that's a problem, right? We have params. Just so you know, like the params hash always takes like names, whether they're positional or named like keyword arguments. It's just the way it is. And so here we're saying widget is string, but widget, if it's not passed, is nil. So that's no good. So one thing we can do is to fix that is, okay, it's a nillable string, right? We fixed a lot of stuff. Oh, wait, but now we're doing 2s plus widget. That's like a string plus nil. That doesn't make sense. So we can do something like here, you know, foobar widget, let's say join, I'll do that. Yeah. And like this will, because join like takes everything into, it just like automatically coerces to strings. So that is fine. You can also do something like if you're really, you know, map 2s join, you know, it just sort of helps, again, like all these static checks. And the last one is this. So like you can say, you know, there's still like dynamic stuff in Ruby where like even if there is types under the hood, you know, like I showed, like you see there's a problem with, there'll be runtime errors or whatever if you do like a string plus a symbol or anything, but it's still dynamic in the sense of like a variable can hold basically whatever. And you see like A is defined or starts with an integer, then it's a symbol, no problem. But now if you do B equals T let this string, now it's like B has to be a string. Like you cannot assign any non-string to it. And then I'm going to sort of wrap it up there, and I want to see what people think about gradual typing, because one thing that I really like about this
Yep, everything in the file.
Thanks, Max. As opposed to true, which is like, check this file, but anything like this is still fine. Like A is not typed, and it's just like, we got nothing to say about that. But B is typed, so it's fine. So we know to check. And if you do typed false there, let's see what happens with typed strict. Still the same. I don't know. So yeah, that's I mean, there's so much more to say about this, but we only have so much time, and I want to let people talk. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to stop sharing. Get back to all your lovely faces. Thank you. And let's see, Max has used Sorbet. Just so is it full disclosure? I don't know. I haven't worked on Sorbet, but I was introduced to it when I worked at Stripe, and it was created there, and it was heavily used in their code base. And one thing I'll say is you have to get used to writing in Sorbet. It is Ruby, but it's Ruby with types. So you have to get used to it. It's not just hey, let me write all my normal Ruby stuff. You have to think about doing everything correctly and making sure that you're returning what you say you're returning, and you're returning very specific things, because you don't want to get into all the unions. This method can return 5 different things, or a hash that may or may not have these keys specified. It gets annoying. And so you're all right, you learn to change your way of thinking and your way of programming.
I think
I just want to say Casey had something about, apparently he was originally he was a hater on gradual typing. Early on he wanted it full one or the other, but he's relaxed.
Yeah, I've softened on that. I still haven't tried Sorbet, so I don't know how I would feel about it specifically, but I know when I started learning TypeScript, I really, really didn't like adding it to a JavaScript project. I wanted to either have a nothing but TypeScript project with all the strict compiler flags on, or keep it pure JavaScript. And I think I see the nuance now. I see the utility of trying to carve out pockets of an existing code base with boundaries that allow anything to come in, and then sort of establish the types within there, and then you can kind of expand from there. And I don't know. I feel like I should give Sorbet another shot, because I did not like it at all at first.
Yeah.
Yeah, please, Max.
Jumping right off that, I feel like the biggest, so I will start off. I love types. I love TypeScript. When I was doing Java in school, I got way into types. So I know that for many people, types are a new thing or a struggle. And I am very much the opposite thing. So with that disclaimer in there, the biggest thing about types is they are an entirely other part of the language. And I think it's helpful to remember that it's not just oh, here's one new operator you're learning to deal with. No, this is an entire other layer. And that also it is often easier to learn how to deal with them when you're writing brand new code, but even adding like the littlest pieces of them in existing code base can help. So like the first thing I will do in a JavaScript project, and you can do this, I think in most editors, I use VS Code. You can add type docs just as comments and start adding types there and get type checking in. And just adding a couple of those will help your code. And same with sorbet. And I added that to a huge project a number of years ago. I think Chris was on that project with me.
Yep.
And it was really good in some places, and in some of, and I mean, in some, like, it was an existing code base, right? And so in some parts where some of the methods were already very complicated, and like you said, returning mixed types and doing a lot of things inside them, those were the hardest to do. And so like the good news is it will help you write smaller functions or methods or whatever you're doing. It can be hard to get there, especially if you've got something existing. So like even the smallest pieces, like, or if you're adding like new utilities, throw some types on there or something, and then everywhere you use them, it'll start kind of spidering out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can only agree with so much of that. There's some stuff in the chat as well about like, well, let me just start with what you said at the beginning, is like types is a whole facet of language, right? And that is a big thing. Like that's what I experience as well. It's just you're used to writing Ruby and you're doing this in sorbet, and that code base was largely or entirely sorbetified. But that doesn't mean, I mean, the nice thing is that there weren't parts of it that were and parts of it that weren't, and I was like getting whiplash, but it did mean I had that bit of like the way I was thinking and the way I was used to writing this wasn't entirely compatible with that. And I think Chris said something about like it makes some Ruby idioms kind of awkward, and that's true. And I think that's part of, I mean, you make that choice, right? It's either like, don't use those idioms, like write more sorbet than Ruby. And then maybe the choice there is like it's harder to convert to an entirely new language than it is to like add sorbet to something. So that's why you're doing it. It could be, don't use sorbet there at all, right? Or it could be like add some more stuff there. Like this is this is why things like t.any exist, and like t.nillable and t.must and whatever. And there is all the stuff that I didn't go into. There's the idea of like unions. That's what t.any is. And then there's like interfaces and stuff like that. And so you have this flexibility even within this strictness, and you have the flexibility of it being gradual as well. So I feel like, yeah, that works in my experience. And with me personally, it works so much better to like ease into it and to make things like incrementally better, leave things better than you found it. And then you get more and more the feeling of like, oh yeah, the sort of like design by contract kind of stuff is very helpful, because I can just say like, I know what's going to come in, and I am requiring myself to write this in a way that it's clear this is going out and only this is going out. And that's a lot easier for me than just like, no, everything switches to full type. And I'm like, I should have just started writing this in, I don't know, Java. Like it doesn't, this is weird. I'm going to read a little bit of the chat to myself while if anybody else has something to say.
I think using sorbet, and I think Max and I used it quite a bit on one of these projects. It was really kind of top to bottom. And yeah, I think the part that kind of bummed me out about it is like, for all of the code that's under your control, it's great and I like it, and all those things that you say are true. But it's like, to me, once you start using more than like one gem, it becomes like this big sort of maintenance issue, because these big frameworks and kind of like really comprehensive Ruby-ish libraries, those get really, really tricky to have. Like, so it's kind of like anytime you call out to some other code, it's kind of, it seemed to me at least like that was sort of all out the window, because then it's basically like, I don't know. And so you can go in and like fill out these signature files and then have it sort of say, oh, okay, this library code that I don't know about, you're promising that, foo from the library takes an integer and returns a string or something like that. And that works, but then you have to like add all those things. And that kind of became a bummer, because just in practical terms, I didn't necessarily want to do PRs that also had a giant pile of like, me just adding stuff to like the signature file, and then I had like a one line change for the rest of the PR, So just kind of like practical things like that I found to be kind of a bummer, but I did like it.
Yeah, compared to like TypeScript. And I mean, part of it is just like, also at the time we were using it, sorbet was really, really new. And so, like, coming from TypeScript, where it's like, oh, I need the types. Okay, bam, I found them. Every now and then you don't, right? And then whatever, you look up the API and you write them yourself. Like, this was very much the polar opposite, where it was like, this has no types. This has no types. This has no types. Oh,
yeah.
Okay, well, good. This is fine.
Well, I think,
which wasn't.
Yeah.
Go
Sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead, Max. Oh, I was just going to say basically the same thing. So sorry.
Yeah. I mean, yes. I definitely had different experiences from both of you, because I was working at Stripe and it was largely already sorbet. And if you ran into problems, you like got on the same Slack as everything else, and you were like poking somebody like, what do I do here? Or can you fix this thing? But I think now, like, sorbet is very mature. I mean, honestly, I haven't used it a whole lot since, right? Since working at Stripe, because I don't have other code bases that are using it. But like, it's been released and it's like sorbet.org now, as opposed to just an internal thing. But yeah, the problem, of course, with it being a gradual thing is that there's all the external stuff that you use, and like the promise of open source and community development and all this is like, CMX is that you're using all this stuff that you don't have full control over, or you're not responsible for. But then you're like, okay, now I am responsible for it. Yes. Jim reminded me there's a time check. We have an hour for this, and I would love to talk forever, but we have to wrap up, and we don't want our first video to be horribly long. So just a little bit. I'll just say, like, thank you all who are here. Thank you all later. Like and subscribe, or whatever it is that you say. But also final comments from anyone, if anyone wants to get something in. No, and let's just end with a whimper rather than a bang. And we'll continue this.
Slam that laptop shut.
Yeah, we'll continue this in Slack and other places. Thank you for being here. Thanks for watching.